Uh, yeah, for having me here. So yeah, I mean, you already introduced me, of course, but I still wanted to say a little bit. So I've been doing sleep research for a long time already because already started during my undergrad in Björn Rush's lab, and it kept me interested throughout my PhD, where I worked on sleep in infants and gut microbiota. But my main interest in sleep is sleep and dreaming and how that kind of helps us or hinders us across the lifespan. So this is why for my postdoc I choose to really go back to dreaming and do this study at the Donders Sleep and Memory Lab. And I'm actually sitting in a room full of packed up stuff because I'm leaving the Netherlands at the end of the week and I will go to Stanford in January to analyze the data we collected. So when we talk about dreaming, I first want to actually kind of agree upon a definition that we will use for dreaming, at least for this next hour that we're talking together, because different definitions can and have been used. But the one I like most is the most basic definition, and that is to include any mental activity that occurs during sleep. So this can include these very complex dream scenes that you might think of when you think of dreaming, but it can also include things as simple visual imagery, words, or even just some audio. I think it makes most sense to include kind of all of that because while there might be different functions, sort of depending on the different dreams, to create really a good theory of why we're dreaming, we need to explain all of these different types of dreams. Now, under this broad umbrella of dreaming, there are, of course, also certain types of dreams that people are specifically interested in or like to hear about. One of them is lucid dreams, so the dreams where dreamers are aware that they are dreaming and in an additional step sometimes can even change their dream content. These are, of course, super interesting dreams, especially to experience yourself, and they're also of interest to researchers, which I will come back to. However, one has to be aware that these make up a very, very small percentage of all of our dreams. So most of our dreams are not lucid. Um, the same also goes for nightmares. So nightmares are these intense, frightening dreams, and very often we include in the definition that they have to wake up the sleeper. Some people argue about whether or not that has to be part. But even those dreams, while they are frightening and while they can be part of a lot of psychopathologies, they, at least in the healthy population, only make up 0.03% of the dreams. So most of our dreams we aren't lucid. Most of our dreams aren't super frightening, but they're just kind of regular dreams we have throughout the night. But well, when do we have them in the night? When do we dream? Well, this is a question that we have thought about for quite a while now. So, as you all might know, in the 50s, Oserinsky and Kleitman discovered this strange sleep stage that we call REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep, because as you can see here, while the person is asleep, they move their eyes around a lot. Now, there's a little bit of a discourse now if maybe it was even discovered earlier in Russia. But what they specifically also did is they linked REM sleep to dreaming. So at that point, we thought, okay, we dream about 1.5, 2 hours a night whenever we are in REM sleep. And then they thought, okay, that also makes sense because we know there are certain brain areas that are more active in REM sleep, so you see those in red, and that are less active in REM sleep, you see those in this greenish hue. And the ones that are less active are areas that are involved with working memory and control and judgment, and the ones more active are involved with emotions and also visual aspects. So this kind of made a lot of sense, of course, for how dreams are. but then time kind of moved on and people still tried to get dreams from non-REM sleep, and lo and behold, all of a sudden people start reporting dreams from non-REM sleep. The case is not that all of a sudden this is a new development that people also dream during non-REM sleep, but why this changes because we changed the way we ask people. So if we ask them, what did you dream just before waking up? In non-REM sleep, they will often say, oh, I did not dream. But if you just ask them what was going through your mind, then they will actually report something. So the reason for that is more that people had this preconceived notion what a dream is like, and they thought of this very vivid story like dreams, but they actually had dreams in non-REM sleep, but they maybe felt more like thoughts or just single images. So now, well, is the assumption now that we dream 8 hours a night? I think most people wouldn't go as far because depending on when you wake people up, depending on the sleep stage, but also the time of the night, you can always get a dream, but chances to get one can be a lot lower or a lot higher. So in REM sleep, on average, across several studies, you get about 80% of the time that people will report a dream to you when you wake them up, while in non-REM sleep, it's about 50% of the time. And then there are also times when you really have N3 sleep, so really a lot of slow waves going on, where it's very rare that people will remember a dream. So there might be times of the night where we have dreamless sleep. However, this is still not certain because it's kind of impossible to disentangle people not remembering their dream from people not having a dream. And this was also my experience in the lab, even if you have a whole lot of slow waves going on, sometimes some people will still remember a dream. So we haven't really solved the problem of when do we dream, but we can sort of give a probability. And if we go with the estimates just of when people actually remember their dream content, we can say, okay, around 4.5, 5 hours of the night, people will definitely be dreaming, potentially much more than that, and they are just forgetting it. And just kind of a little sidestep, this actually can also be expanded a little bit to waking thought. So in the traditional view, we thought of, okay, we have dreaming, we have dreamless sleep, we have hypnagogia, so sort of the thoughts while we fall asleep, and then we have wakefulness. But actually, also during wake, we change between a lot of different states of mind where we sometimes focused on the task. So maybe you're paying attention to what I'm saying, but then every now and then your mind might just wander off and think about different things. Maybe it's getting a little boring and repetitive. And sometimes you also have these states where you're actually blanking in your mind, where you don't have really much of a thought or experience going on in your mind. So it's very interesting to see how this is kind of mirrored across the sleep-wake states. All right, so now we know we dream. Definitely most people dream most of the night, all the nights we have. So it's actually a very common thing, and there's a lot going on. But how do we now measure and study these dreams that we are so interested in? Well, the first and easiest approach people took is, of course, questionnaires. So you just ask people what dreams do they remember, how often do they dream of these things. This is nice because you can get a very big sample size. It's quite low cost and low effort. However, it is also problematic because think about your past months. Which dreams did you have in the past months? Well, maybe in the morning you remember, maybe once, twice a week you remember the dream, but do you remember this a month later? Probably not. And the ones that you do remember are likely kind of different from your average dreams. So you were very likely to remember dreams that are bizarre, that are surprising, but you're not so likely to remember the boring dreams, right? So this, why it's nice and we can get big samples and some idea about dreaming, it's also a highly biased sample. So well, what is another solution? We can ask people to keep a dream diary. So every morning, just after they wake up, they will write down their dreams if they remember them. Again, we can do this with big sample sizes. It's a bit more cost and effort, mainly for the participants themselves. For us, it's still kind of low cost. Because yeah, every morning they have to take their time, and if they do remember a dream, it will take maybe 10 minutes to describe it. So what can we sample with this? Well, if we use diaries, what we actually get from dream content is usually their last REM dream, because they will have forgotten the dreams from earlier in the night. And especially since also most often we wake up from REM sleep and we're more likely to remember our dreams if we do. This is kind of the sample we get. So it's going to be a bit less biased sample than with questionnaires, because you still will get some, sorry, some REM dreams that are maybe a little bit more on the boring side and so on. But it's still very biased because it's just going to be sort of late night dreams and REM dreams. And also, again, if we think about that, we do have around 4.5 hours of dreams per night. This will still mean we're not capturing, for 1/4 hours of this streaming. So, so then people came up with a way to kind of counteract these biases and really get at least a better sampled way of dream reports, and that is to use what is the so-called serial awakening paradigm. This is, of course, very large cost and effort, because people have to come to the lab, they sleep while we have the EEG on them, and then throughout the night you wake them up and ask them about their dream reports. And the problem is that, of course, this leads to small sample sizes used in the studies. But what really helps is that you have a much better sample of dreams, because you can spread it throughout the night, you can get different sleep stages, and therefore a much more representative sample. Still, however, you're missing, of course, a lot of dreams. So if we say we have 4.5 hours of dreams with a method like this, you might get maybe 60 minutes of dream content, if you're lucky. Maybe even much less, because they might also not remember their dreams. So it's still a lot we're missing, but at least we're getting sort of a representative sample. And with this method, of course, you also include the EEG, so you can look at actually the neural correlates of dreaming, and you can look at also the brain activity and how does the brain activity differ when you have a certain dream rather than another dream. This is data, well, a lot of the data I will be showing now is from Francesca Ciclaris herself and her lab, because she did a lot of seminal work on this. And basically what she found is that actually our brain activity is not that different during sleep and wake. So for example, if you dream about seeing a face, you will activate in the gamma range in the same areas than what we know from wake is if you see a face, so the fusiform face area. And this is kind of good news, because this means that if we want to work towards decoding dream content from brain activity, we can use similar methods than we do during wake. And Ziegler showed that especially for dream content, this gamma range is very important. So it can show us differences between more thoughtful versus more perceiving dreams. Again, of course, the sort of seeing a face. It also distinguishes whether or not we have a spatial setting in the dream and whether or not someone is talking in the dream. And again, this all lines up very much with what we would expect from wakeful states, which areas to be active when we hear someone, when we have a setting, and so on. So it really seems to be very similar in sleep and wake. But there are also some areas where there's a difference, between sleep and wake, but also between if you have a dream and don't have a dream. So partially this is also in this gamma frequency, so 20 to 50 hertz. And you can see in non-REM and REM sleep, there's certain areas where if you have a dream versus if you're sleeping but don't have a dream, you show higher activation. So this is over occipital and parietal areas. And in REM sleep, a little bit more parietal than occipital, but some overlaps as well. So we have, I wouldn't say really a good marker of when someone is dreaming, but from the EEG, we can get sort of an idea or maybe a likelihood of if someone is dreaming versus they are not dreaming. And next to the gamma frequency, what is a good marker for this is delta, so slow wave activity, these very large slow waves. And here, very interestingly, the areas actually seem to match up very well between non-REM and REM sleep. So if you have a lot of slow wave activity in these regions, and this is also called the posterior cortical hot zone, you are much less likely to experience a dream. However, a bit more recent work also has pointed out or shown that it's not just slow waves in general, because there are actually two different type of slow waves. So there are these delta waves, which are these slow waves that kind of appear together, and they appear more in these occipital areas. And yes, those have a negative association with dreaming. However, there are also this type 2, or what is termed type 2 slow waves, what can also be called K complexes, and these are more in parietal areas, and these actually have a positive association with dreaming, especially if they're linked with a microarousal. So if you have a K complex and then a microarousal, this actually predicts if you will recall the dream you just had. So again, it's not as simple as just slow waves means no dreaming. It's definitely also not as simple as that. Even if you have a lot of slow waves, people might still. So it's always sort of a probabilistic association. But still, if we have dreamless sleep, it's going to be this kind of sleep where you have a lot of slow waves. And of course, this kind of reading the dream content from brain activity is also so interesting because I mentioned before, we even with the serial awakening paradigm, which is so much effort for both the participant and the experimenter, we miss so much dream content, right? So wouldn't it be nice if we could just take the EEG and know what the people dreamt about? Well, there are people trying to work on this. In this case, this is kind of an older study, and it's not EEG but MRI, but they did try, can they sort of decode from brain activity what the person is dreaming about? They did this in 3 participants, and they had them sleep and dream in the MRI and did 200 awakenings per participant, and then trained the decoder on this content. And you can see it kind of works. So for example, when they did dream about the character, they did, the probability of dreaming about the character did increase. But it's also, yeah, it is not perfect, right? It's a little bit of an increase, and obviously dreams are very complex. It's not so easy to just, it's usually you don't just have like one thing like food or car, you have a mix of things, it's a setting, things change. But in principle, this shows that it would be possible. But as I've also shown before, actually, since the brain activity is so similar between dreams and wake regarding content, I think what is the most promising avenue is if we just have models trained during wake and then apply this to dreaming. People are working on this very actively, but it's also not that far yet. So, for example, this study just from this year that came out, they had people where they either saw images or they imagined images, and then they tried to decode it and reconstruct it. Now, when the image that they actually saw, the reconstruction attempts, not too bad, I would say. At least you can sort of see some colors, there's some sort of animal. With the imaginary, well, I think if you don't know it's supposed to be a plane, I don't think you would guess that it was a plane. So yeah, I think there are attempts made there. We will get there at some point in the future, but we are also not there yet. And this is again also on very highly trained. So these are few subjects where they really train a huge model on them, where they see thousands of images in the MRI scanner. And this is then the level of reconstruction you get to. So while it's a promising avenue, and I think at some point in the future we will be able to use this also to decode dream content, we're not there yet. So also don't be too worried about that. This is also why researchers are actually also very interested in another avenue, and that is this lucid dreaming that I mentioned before, which makes up very few dreams. But it is extremely useful because when people are lucid, for one, they can signal that. So as I have shown here, so you can agree sort of pre-specified eye movements that people will make when they're lucid, and they can move their eyes, and you can pick up on that. And the other thing that has recently been shown from across different labs, including the one I'm in, is that there's actually two-way communication that is possible. So you can ask people questions while they're in lucid dream and they can reply. Now, again, also important to highlight, this is more of a proof of principle because there were also many cases when they asked questions and the participants either did not reply or replied wrongly. But in theory, it's possible. So now it's more about fine-tuning this method to make it better and more reliable. And of course, this is extremely interesting because this allows us then to manipulate dreams, because if people are lucid, they can also change their dreams, and it allows us to figure out several different aspects about dreaming, such as if time is perceived the same way and so on. But we also have to be careful because, as I showed before, lucid dreams make up a very small subset of all dreams. And of course, there are differences in lucid dreams that might not apply to all the other dreams, because when you're lucid, certain brain regions do become more active again compared to non-lucid dreams. And of course, this could then also mean that some of the conclusions we make based on lucid dreams do not apply to other dreams. But still a very interesting and promising avenue. Now, moving on, I also want to talk a little bit about what do we dream about. So if you ask people which topics they have ever dreamed about, the most common answers seem to be they dream about flying, they dream about trying something over and over again, they dream that they're being chased, they dream about sexual experiences, and they dream about going to school. However, remember about this bias I talked about before, right? If you think back about the dreams you had, well, flying dreams are very exciting, so you might remember them after a month, but maybe a boring dream about just chatting to your friend, you will not remember. So then based on just the most recent dreams that people had, this changes. So school moves up. I think this is also a little bit dependent on the sample, but yeah, people dream about that. Being chased is also a very frequent dream. Being late to things, they keep trying things over and over again, and then swimming or being in water is actually also quite common. But this is again questionnaire based, so there's still some bias in there. And then if we look actually from the lab studies, what we see a lot is people have a lot of extremely normal, well, what I would call normal dreams. They meet up with their friends, they eat food, they go places. In the Netherlands, we see them biking a whole lot in their dreams and so on. So most dreams aren't actually that bizarre or strange. Most of them really reflect our normal waking lives a lot. Well, most previous dream studies relied on human raters scoring dream content. A new approach there is also to use language processing models. And in this study, I thought they kind of used a nice approach. So basically, they took 40,000 dream reports that were reported in online community, and then they used this language processing models to split them into different dream content, and then they looked at how the dreams change across time. And as you can see here, they marked so when sort of COVID starts and then also the Ukraine war starts. And what they found is that there are actually some changes in dream content. So people had more negative dreams, especially around the start of the war. And they had less social dreams during the COVID peaks. and so on. Again, of course, dreams that are reported in an online community are not very representative dreams, in my opinion, again, because, right, for what reason would you go online and feel, okay, I really have to share this dream? Probably it's kind of a, a special dream, maybe a bit bizarre, a bit more this or that. But still, it's very interesting that we can see that actually in our dreams, we do um, process sort of happenings in the world around us. So you can actually see a reflection of what is happening in the world in people's dreams. And this, of course, then makes us wonder, well, why do we dream? Is there a function of dreaming? And if so, what is this? Well, the honest answer is we don't know. There are a lot of hypotheses, and people really like to hypothesize and think about that. But sadly, we also don't have that much good data on it so far. I will mention a couple of theories, but there are, of course, much more theories than the ones I am mentioning. So some people think dreaming is just a random byproduct. Some people think it's about memory consolidation or simulating the future, that it is about processing emotions. Yeah, and as I said, also there are other hypotheses. So the random byproduct was kind of one of the first real neurobiological theory of dreamings, and Hobson and McCarley posited there that, okay, when we're sleeping, that the brainstem generates signals that spread into the cortex. And then these signals are just interpreted by the brain and make up our dreams, but there's basically no meaning to it. It's just a byproduct of our sleep. However, even Hobson later moved kind of away from the idea that dreams really have no meaning, because actually our dreams do reflect several things about our lives. So we often dream about our recent life. So if you just had an exam, for example, it's very likely that you will dream about this. Maybe you'll have a good dream that you passed it, or you'll have a stressful dream where you're writing the exam and are running out of time. This happens quite a lot. So more than half of our dreams reflect aspects of our recent waking life experience. However, very few of these are exact replays. So you will unlikely dream about the exam situation exactly how it was, but maybe, you know, it's your childhood friend that is testing you, or another mix or match is happening. And with the sleep and memory field kind of detecting these memory reactivations during sleep. So where if you have an experience, certain neurons are active, we found that during sleep, the same neurons in the same sequence will be active again. So then people thought like, oh, maybe this is what dreaming is. You have these memory reactivations and you experience the MS dream. However, while research in this is still kind of ongoing, we wrote a review on this, and it seems kind of unlikely to be at least this direct link, because these memory reactivations, they happen on a very short time span of milliseconds or seconds. They're compressed. You mainly have them during quiet rest and the first part of the night. While dreams, as we discussed, you have them across all sleep stages, but the most vivid dreams you have towards the end of the night in REM sleep. They play on a lot larger time scales and so on. So probably there is a link between dreaming and memory reactivations, but it's probably not a one-of-one sort of that the dreams are the experienced memory reactivations. But there have been by now 16 studies that have showed that that have looked at if dreaming and memory consolidation is linked. And last year, a meta-analysis came out where they pooled these studies. So all of these studies use this principle. Basically, you learn a task before going to sleep. You have a sleep period where you collect the people's dreams and then you test their memory. And what they found is, yes, there is an effect. So the more you dream about a task, the better you are on the memory. And across all studies, this seems to be a medium-sized effect. But actually, there is also a difference between sleep stage. However, I have to add a little caution here, even though my previous studies, one of these studies included here, Because if you actually look at the sample sizes of these studies, it's around, on average, 25 participants. But if you then go sort of backwards and say, okay, if there is a medium-sized effect and you have 25 participants, what is the chance you would actually detect an effect like this? Well, it's only 20%. So in 80% of the studies, you would actually not detect an effect if it was a medium-sized effect and you have 20 participants. So this already makes you think, okay, maybe we really have to go back and see, does this really hold up, or are these results maybe cherry-picked? And yeah, as I mentioned, also one aspect to consider is this non-REM-REM distinction, because in my previous study, we saw that while dream incorporations in non-REM sleep were linked with their memory performance in REM sleep, they were not. And then the question is a little bit, well, what are REM dreams about if they do not help with memory consolidation? And here I'm going into another hypothesis of what sleep and dreams could be for. And this is the sleep to remember, sleep to forget hypothesis from Matthew Walker, where they posited that if you have an emotional memory, it's basically a combination between the memory, so you remember what happened, and the affective tone. And that what happens when you go to sleep and you dream is that over time you consolidate the core memory because you want to remember it, because it being emotional tells you it was important, but you don't want to have this affective tone anymore. You don't want to be upset anymore when you think about it. So that sleep, especially REM sleep, helps with this getting rid of this mental affective tone. And there is a little bit of evidence from early studies that dreaming helps with emotional processing. The studies were done by Cartwright. And what she looked at is she had people in psychotherapy that recently underwent divorce. And then they collected dream reports from them, and they looked at, do they dream about their partner, or do they not dream about their partner? And then they looked at their outcomes, I think a year or something like that later. And what they found is that their patients that dreamt about their partner during the divorce process were better adapted after a year than the ones that did not. So yeah, of course, again, there's a small sample and it's not a very rich research, but it kind of hints towards maybe that dreaming about something will help you process emotionally. So, kind of to recapitulate what we thought the issues with the dreaming and memory literature was so far is that the results are very underpowered. We don't know if this memory function is non-REM specific, and if so, what the function of REM sleep is. And then all the studies so far were correlational approaches. So you look at, okay, how often do they dream about it? And then you look at how well do they do on the memory test. But we don't actually know about the direction and causality. To address these points, I came up with the project for my postdoc, and that is to do this registry report on dreaming and memory consolidation. And the plan was to really have a big sample size. 92 participants is what we calculated we would need to really show an effect. And yeah, we got this accepted principal acceptance from the PCA registry reports. And in this, we want to test the following hypothesis, so that if people incorporate the task into the dreams, we say if this happens in non-REM dreams, then this will be linked with a better memory performance. But if this happens in REM dreams, it will be linked to emotional processing. And then we make use of a method that is called TMR, targeted memory reactivations, where we know that we can bias memory consolidation during sleep. So if there is a link between memory consolidation and dreaming, this biasing of the memory consolidation should lead to a biasing of the dream content. So this was our last hypothesis.
Okay.
And to address this, we use a design across 4 weeks where the participants have a Fitbit and write a dream diary across this time, and then visit us in the sleep lab 3 times. Of course, first an adaptation night, and then we have 2 experimental nights. In one of them, we use the TMR, and the other not. And each experimental night, they learn a memory task where they do a recall before, after sleep, and then also 4 days later. And so the memory task is that, yeah, they learn it, and the task is a word picture association task across 6 categories. So they learn just random words, basically paired to pictures, and they have to remember that each word is paired with a specific picture. And the pictures are neutral, negative, or positive. They recall it before sleep, then they go to sleep with the 2 conditions. And in the spontaneous condition, we wake them up to 8 times. So basically, the awakenings are planned so that in each sleep cycle, we get 1 non-REM and 1 REM awakening, as you can see here with those dashed red lines. And then we ask them about their dreams with a standardized interview, and then they can go back to sleep. And yeah, we do this a maximum of 8 times, but of course, not always possible. Sometimes it takes them longer to go back to sleep and so on. In the TMR night, we do more or less the same, but before we wake them up, we play these TMR cues, which are the words used in the task while they're asleep at the level that it doesn't wake them up, but that we know it affects their the processing in the brain. And we use different cues in REM sleep and in non-REM sleep, so we can also disentangle effects of non-REM and REM dreaming. And then in the morning, after reporting any additional dreams they remember, they recall the task, and then they go home, and then 4 days later, they also do another recall. Now, we finished the study a little while back. We got in total 108 healthy participants. They're all young, they're mostly female, 95 of which completed the whole study, so meaning the whole 4 weeks. A couple of them only did one of the experimental nights. And we managed to really get a lot of dream reports, so we're very happy about that. In total, it's over 3,000 dream reports, about 2/3 of which we collected from the home diaries and about 1,000 with the awakenings in the labs. We always ask them first to report the dream they had just before waking up. So these are called last minute dreams here. But then also if they remember any dreams from earlier in the night or between the last awakening and this awakening. So yeah, I think this is one of the largest data sets ever created on dreaming, especially ones that also has where we also have EEG activity. And just to show a little bit more about how this was split. So if we look across the participants, on average, we have over 30 dreams per participant, but of course, there's a huge range. So we had this one participant that really remembered a lot. So we got 58 dreams from her in total, and then some, we only got 12 from. And also splitting it up between non-REM and REM sleep for the awakenings. So we have more non-REM awakenings that we managed to do because, well, there is more non-REM sleep, so it's a little easier. However, we got, of course, more dreams from REM sleep. We even got more than we did awakenings because sometimes they remember more than one dreams. But if we just look at the awakenings with at least one dream remembered, it's about 60% of non-REM sleep that they remembered at least one dream, and about 90% of REM sleep. We also have some that are thus far still unclassified. This is when the participants themselves woke themselves up, so we're now working on the sleep scoring, and then we can assign those to the appropriate sleep stage. But yeah, in our case, in 73% of the time, they did remember at least one of their dreams. We are still pre-processing this data, and I have run some preliminary analysis, but since I already had so much in the slides, I decided not to go into that. Also, since we still have to double check everything there. Yeah, so hopefully we will be able to address really these questions if dreaming is sort of a reflection of memory consolidation during sleep with this study. However, another important aspect actually of memory consolidation also is that, of course, while memory always sounds like it's about the past, actually the purpose of memory is about the future. So we remember things because we want to be able to better predict the future. And this is also one of the theories that has been around for a while about why we dream. So that dreams actually are simulations of the future. So you will not only dream about your exam after you had it, but even before you have your exam, you know it's upcoming, you will dream about it. Um, and this was also shown in a study by Isabel Arnold, where they found that um, if you dream of your exam before you have it, this is actually predictive of passing the exam. And this is the case even if the dreams are negative. So even if you dream that you will fail it or that you're late, you're more likely to pass it. So this is a little bit of evidence that maybe dreams do simulate the future. And very often, this theory is linked to that dreams are evolutionary adaptive because they let us simulate threatening events, and that would lead to higher survival. This is, of course, very hard to test, but there have been some data in studies on children from war region that dream more about threatening situations than children from not affected regions. Of course, it's really hard to disentangle this from the memory effect because this can actually also be just explained from a memory perspective. But I think the reason why it's so hard to disentangle is again because I think these are basically, they boil down to the same function because memory, the point of memory is to predict the future. So for memory, we need to simulate. And emotion actually is what tells us which part of the memory is relevant to simulate for the future. So this is why I believe this is kind of all the same function, and that very likely dreaming is highly important in this process. In the last 2 minutes, I just want to a little bit also talk about from the perspective of sort of science as a journey, because I know this is also aimed more at younger, early career scientists, and you might be looking towards doing a postdoc or something like that soon. So this project took really a long time. So the idea sort of came up in summer 2019, and then I contacted Martin, finalized the idea, I submitted the grant so that I would have funding to do this. I received the money, then I worked on the ethics, submitted it, then a while later moved to Nijmegen, started my grant, and then it actually took a very long time until we got the stage one acceptance by the PCA register reports. And this is because, of course, there's always a lot happening while we do our research. As you remember, there was a global pandemic. Even while I moved to Nijmegen, there were still lockdowns happening. So both the start and the research was delayed through that. I also finished my PhD in the time while I was planning this project. Then I got long COVID while we were trying to get the register report accepted, which meant I was out of work for a long time. I had some other work that was published in the meantime, and then I wrote a lot of other grants also to support this huge project because paying for 92 participants, paying for the lab, and so on was very costly. And as you can see, there were some successes, but also a lot of failures along the way. So the yellow ones are the grants I ended up receiving, the red ones I didn't receive, and here I started one, which I then ended up not even submitting. So it's really yeah, there's always lots of up and downs, and it's just a lot of work getting science done while also the global circumstances change. And even when we started, of course, it took a long time. So we got this acceptance in January. We then were really eager to start. In February, recruited the first participants. But then it took us 1.5 years to finish the data collection. And this is also because, well, it is a lot of work. So doing this sort of reproducible projects in sleep research, it really scales up kind of badly compared to maybe other research areas. So going from 20 to 90 participants just means so much more time investment. So we had over 200 nights where we couldn't sleep ourselves, and across all the people who helped do this, we spent over 5,500 hours in the lab. And as you can see in this 1.5 years, basically most weeks we did 3 nights in the lab, which, yeah, you can imagine how the week is affected by that. And you can even see my own sleep, how that was affected. So this early period is when we did data collection, and then I went on holidays, and this is my sleep pattern. So yeah, you can see this is not super fun to do, but I still think it was very important work to get done. And also in this time, I tried to apply for grants, sadly, mainly unsuccessful. I now retried, and I hope this time will be more successful. But also, the other work does not stop. So while all this was going on, I still published a lot of work from my PhD or projects I was involved with on the side. So yeah, postdoc time is a very busy time, and there's lots of up and downs, but I think ultimately it's still very worth it to get such unique data on sleep and dreaming. With that, thank you all for listening. Thanks to my co-authors on this. And these are students and other researchers who were involved along the way in helping with data collection and also data pre-processing.